Good morning. Saturday morning.
Hello, good morning. It's Spine Crackers
morning.
morning edition, and
My
we have
name
our
is-
coffee.
My name's Terry Gross. Welcome to Spinecrackers Weekend Edition.
Man, I wish I could. Can anyone do their best NPR voice?
That was pretty much it for me.
I
Do
wish
it.
I could do Mr. Glass what's his name?
Ira.
Ira Glass.
Ira Glass, but I
That
can't.
you got to go real up into your nose.
Nasal yeah.
He had a moment there, didn't he?
What is he doing now? He's still doing This American Life?
I don't know, because I mean, I stopped listening to all that stuff.
Or didn't he take over for Garrison Keillor and they like changed the name of the show?
Really?
No, there's a different guy that's doing Prairie Home Companion because Garrison Keillor was canceled.
Prairie Home Companion is over now. It's called Live from Here, but it's not Ira Glass that hosts it. It's a guy called Chris Thiel.
Oh, Chris Thiel's the fucking he's the mandolin player who's also like a nerd. Like
he's the man. He plays the Mandalorian.
Yeah, really well, like a virtuoso.
NPR Mandalorian.
Hey there, this is Boba Fett. This is Good Morning. It's Saturday morning, and time to peruse the news with Boba.
I can't take off my helmet because of my religion, but I'm here for you. I came in on a rocket pack.
Is that real?
Well, it's complicated, but yes.
I don't want to talk about it, actually.
Okay, yeah. You're missing out, is all I can say. It's a great show.
Because, Gabe, drumroll, please introduce the book that we're talking about today.
We are talking today about I Served the King of England, which is a 1971 novel by Czech author Bohumil Hrabal. That's the closest I can get. I think the key in the last name there is which A you emphasize.
Hrabal?
Is it Hrabal or Hrabal?
I thought it was Bohumil Hrabal.
All right, let's
not. I think I nailed that one.
But I think you did too.
Yeah, nice. There's going to be a lot of maybe we should stay away from names in this book, but
or just listen. We're gonna butcher these things, and that's gonna be a big part of today's episode is mispronouncing names. I mean, it's gonna happen with other authors too if we stray too far from North America. Unfortunately,
places. Pretty much any and all proper nouns will be mispronounced.
Yeah, even looking at the phonetic sort of pronunciation, I still don't actually know how to say it.
Doesn't help at all. It doesn't help at all.
No.
So anyway, this is a book that tells the story. It follows a young busboy named Didi.
Fuck, man.
Didi.
Yeah.
We're off to a good start here. D-I-T-I-E is the spelling for anyone out there listening. And it is, Didi. We'll go with Didi. It follows his sort of life trajectory from about age 15, where he starts out working as a busboy in a hotel in Czechoslovakia, and sort of follows his life trajectory through various hotel jobs and moving up within the industry to waiter, head waiter, ultimately owning his own hotel, all the while through the political turmoil of World War II, and then the 1948 Czech coup d'etat, where the Soviet-supported communists overthrew the Czech government and then sort of instituted a communist regime for a few years there, and then follows him through that. That's basically the skeleton of the story.
Yes, it's Czech Forrest Gump. As Gabe already said before we started recording.
Life is like a bag of Czech mix.
God damn.
I know it sucks, but you
That was
gotta
good. No,
you
that
gotta
was
do callbacks.
I was good. You could have gone with life is like a bag of checklets.
Damn it! But they're all the
It's
same.
a
That was the
box.
problem.
It's not even a
Yeah.
bag. It's a box. Oh God.
It doesn't work on so many levels, dude.
Cancel this fucking episode.
Well,
Well,
Gabe, do we want to talk about why you picked this book? Do you want to
Sure,
do that too?
First of all, Paul, you are correct. So anyone who listened last week or the week before when we talked about Moon Palace, one of the major points of contention was whether or not it was like Forrest Gump. And
and how often you compare things to Forrest Gump.
yes. And I think this will be my third because this book is just fucking like Forrest Gump.
The old doubling down maneuver instead of I love
Write
it.
a thesis paper on every book is Forrest. Like 30% of all books is just Forrest Gump.
Yeah, Forrest Gump is like the Joseph Campbell like fucking mono myth.
Yeah. The Forrest's journey.
Wow.
So yeah, I picked this book. I am personally a really big fan of Eastern European sort of post World War II Soviet Socialist Republic kind of Eastern Bloc literature. I find it so, like Bruno Schultz is one of my favorite authors, and all those sorts of guys who were writing in that sort of post-war, communist era in that part of the world. I've always just found that their work just in general to just be so this perfect blend. It goes beyond dark comedy to me because it's
Yeah.
so like it's so human and it's so sort of sympathetic but also like horrific and sad and absurd. The absurdism of that part of the world in those years is like impossible to overstate, I think. And I've always just loved that sort of, not to lump it all together obviously, but like literature from that part of the world and that period in history has always really appealed to me. So that's why I picked this book. I'd read one of his other books, Dancing Lessons for the Advanced in Age, I think it's called. It's excellent, and I wanted to read another one.
This, I mean, you can kind of generalize a bit though. I mean, it's kind of, I feel like a lot of people, I don't know, like tend to sort of describe the effect of like the post World War II kind of ripple effect, especially coming hot on the heels of World War I, and just like and its effect on art in general, not just like writing and everything. And then like in that region, those regions and those cultures that you just described, which seems hyper niche, there was, I think understandably, like a ton of creative, I don't know, like turnout and work happening there. Just because, like you said, yeah, you get all of the like dark, I don't know, like surreal human tragicomedy of just like the ruptures of these wars, overturning things that were considered once to be like kind of a given and steadfast, and then like also like meditating on the evils humanity is capable of. And then also, especially like, for instance, in this in Czechoslovakia anyway, like multiple types of kind of basically despotic governments and ideologies taking place like one after another, and all just kind of being dysfunctional and bad. And yeah, you definitely are going to get an interesting perspective that you're not going to be able to get from any other like time period.
Yeah, I definitely think it was a sort of unique kind of concatenation of circumstances that came together to produce that specific sort of tone and approach that a lot of those writers from that period took, for sure.
It's probably difficult to not be influenced when all that was going on too as a writer. Like if you were alive in your 20s and 30s and 40s during the wars, it's like how can that not influence your work in some way too?
What's interesting about this book though is how it's not like it's minor influence, but just how little I don't know, like the war kind of just happens in the background, and then the Nazis are there in Prague.
Like
but,
Forrest Gump. It just kind of happens like
no, because he goes to Vietnam, dude.
within the story. Yeah, it's just but it was like, you're right. But
Got
it's
you.
just like a story happening around him, you know, that
Right.
he's kind of offhandedly involved in. Doesn't Forrest Gump just like get on a bus and go to Vietnam? I forget even why he goes to Vietnam. He's just like, I'm in
Pretty sure
Vietnam
he
now.
runs there.
Yeah. He runs like the Jesus lizard across the water. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, in terms of like I mean, I think it is sort of that background radiation in terms of the way the story is told. Like the war, you know, he's much more affected by the sort of after effects of the war individually than he is by the war itself, at least at the beginning. And I mean, I think later on the war, obviously, you know, it's sort of like erupts into his life at like key moments, and like changes the sort of course of his, you know, story. But you know, and then I think like towards the end of the book, when he's kind of reflecting on his life, he has a sort of different view of it than he did as it was unfolding around him. But yeah, I think I know what you mean, Matt, in terms of the sort of war just being this kind of ambient thing.
Which, you know, maybe reflects more accurately what it's like if your country is not an active war zone, but it's like happening close to you, and there's like interpenetration of cultures that are fighting each other and stuff. Like if you're just a citizen with your head down, it would maybe just kind of crop up in these weird, you know, sometimes violent ways, but mostly just be something you were maybe even actively trying to ignore.
Right. Yeah. I think I think that's a good and I think that comes through in the book in a lot of ways too. And especially the sort of active ignorance part.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, this book. So Hrabal was an interesting guy. I'm not going to get into his biography too much, but he had a number of books in the 70s, including this one, that were banned from publication. He was banned from publishing, period, in the 70s by the government. And this book and a couple others were published in sort of you know, secret sort of samizdat editions that were only available on sort of the underground, you know. And I don't think it was published until the 80s officially. And yeah, so he was sort of intimately familiar himself with kind of being, you know, suppressed and stuff by these sorts of tyrannical, or not, you know, tyrannical is probably an extreme word, but his work was viewed politically, certainly in Czech.
And that's right, because like the Communist Party that like succeeded, did the coup d'etat, weren't they were in power for a long time, weren't they?
Yeah,
like 48 to like the 90s sometime.
I think something like that. Yeah, I don't know the exact dates.
So is that why he would have been like, you know, repressed and censored?
Yeah. Yep.
Got you. I mean, he gets freaky. Like but in like a funny ways, just like I feel like the first half of this book, or the first maybe third of this book, is so front loaded with like hilarious, because he's a waiter. He's just like this little guy. He's like super short. He's a manlet. He's running around, and he is just appeasing people's various appetites and his own. And it's just eating and fucking is basically like all that is happening in some form or another. And just like the, you know, the subtleties of different hedonistic pleasures and stuff.
Yeah,
it's really funny.
Is very sort of erotic, and yeah, hedonistic is a great word.
But like, who did the cover of this particular, of the New York Review of Books edition? Because like, I also, what is this called? This style? I'm so stupid. I can't fucking. I don't know.
It's all right.
It says cover illustration by someone named Catherine Denvere, And
Oh, I know her.
Yeah, biblically.
Yeah, I know her.
And I don't know what you would call this style. Art, I don't know. Visual art. It's not a visual art.
There's certainly images.
Yeah, if our pronunciation is bad, our visual art knowledge is worse. Paul, you're an
It's
artist.
definitely, I am, but this is definitely an art style, as I can see.
That's
No,
fascinating.
yeah, it's at the tip of my tongue, but I can't think of it, honestly.
Anyway,
it's cool though. I like it.
So Matt, what's your? I mean, we can describe it, but it's this sort of very kind of like angular and sort of, you know,
Illustrative. It's pretty illustrative.
Yeah, semi-cartoonish, like almost looks like you know, like sort of like a South Park animation style, almost like flat paper. You know what I mean?
Beautifully said. Yeah, like exactly.
Visual art again, my forte.
But I don't know. It's a good evocation of the feel of I would say again like the first third of the novel, where you're kind of like enchanted and in this like uncanny and I don't know hyper like exaggerated world of glittering hotels and silverware and fancy glasses with all types of booze in them and just fancy people just eating and having sex with each other and selling wonders, and it's all just like it's in the words of Clifford Lee Sargent.
No, the beef.
Just sex and death, man.
Sex and death, baby.
The only two things worth writing about.
There's not a lot of death in the first part of the book.
No, like I was saying, death kind of. Well, I mean, death is kind of almost a revelation at the end, and I think it very like pointedly just sort of floats and looms around Dee without him acknowledging it for the vast majority of the book. But yeah,
yep,
just people indulging a lot in the beginning.
Yeah, I'll just say, as part of the reason, not necessarily that I picked the book in the first place, but reading it, part of the reason that I loved it so much, and I'll just put my cards on the table. I fucking loved this book. I enjoyed it immensely, and one of the reasons that that's the case is that I spent most of my life in the service industry until like 2 years ago, and it is so just accurate even to this day, right? It's these people who are like, obviously that's a very different culture, like formal, like waiting in very fancy hotels in Europe in that period of time where you're serving generals and government officials, and it's very formal and it's very proper, and you're expected, the opening lines of the book are hilarious, where his first job as a busboy, his boss pulls on his one ear and says, "Hey, you see nothing and you hear nothing," and then he grabs his other ear and he says, "But you see everything and you hear everything."
Yeah.
and I just thought that was such a great sort of introduction to that world, where you are sort of expected to be this kind of like impartial observer, where it's just and that contrasted with the sort of like orgiastic insanity of what he witnesses is I think hilarious and still true.
Yeah, I mean, I spent only a couple years in the service industry, mostly as like a dishwasher and a busboy, but I remember those years like so vividly and clearly, and he really did a good job of just like describing that world of being a server, being in the behind the scenes so well. It also, I mean, I definitely had vibes of Grand Budapest Hotel, the first third of this movie. And that's not even a bad comparison. I really like that movie.
No, actually, it's not. Yeah, I would say, it's not actually.
At first, when I first started reading it, I was like, is this just like, is the Grand Budapest Hotel just based off this book? And he ripped it off completely, because you get the feeling that there's some foreshadowing pointing to that he is going to become like a successful guy, millionaire later in his life, and that's what happens in Grand Budapest Hotel. It's like told from the point of view of the young busboy when he's like in his 60s or something.
Yep.
And he's like telling his life story, and I was like, Wes Anderson, you're a fucking hack. but then but then it definitely took different twists and turns along the way. So I was like, okay, it's different.
Everyone that isn't us or an author that we enjoy is a hack on this.
Indeed, yes. Official stance. It's a binary. It's yeah.
Drooling hog, hack, fraud.
Fuck yeah, that's right.
But I think
Yes.
again, it's even down to the different, characters that he interacts with, from the sort of hotel owners to the porters to the different head waiters that he works under. They're all like archetypes that anyone who's spent a lot of time in the service industry knows. Like I know, one of the first head waiters, or I forget if he's a head waiter or just a waiter, that he works with, who becomes a figure in the story throughout. Zdenek, is that how we're saying that?
He's a main character. He's throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, he's throughout the book, and his sort of personality as a waiter is, he's the guy who, at the end of his shift, he goes out and spends every cent that he made getting wasted and like buying flowers for people in the town, and like waking up the entire like village at like 5 a.m. to make someone play music for him.
Right.
And, like I know many people like that from the service industry.
It's like Mr. Nihilistic good times.
Yeah, exactly. And, later some of the other people he works under are more sort of like, like very clinical and very like scientific about it, and they can predict, what every customer is going to order before they order it, and all that sort of stuff. And I just know this cast of characters was intimately familiar to me, and I thought it was a very human portrayal of that industry.
And like,
well, I guess we could talk about like, I think the second hotel he works at, the second head waiter he works under,
the hotel
is actually what?
Hotel Tichota?
Yeah. That's where we get the title of the book, though, because he starts working under this waiter, and the waiter can just basically like guess where someone who just came in, like where they're from and what they're going to order, and they put like $20 down in front of them, and he's like, go ask and guess what they're going to eat, and the DT always gets it wrong, and the head waiter always gets it right, and he says like, how do you know that? And he's like, I serve the King of England. And that's just like a running funny joke that I love so much. Every time he's just like, I serve the King of England.
Yeah, so I think it's actually the third hotel that he works at. But Mr. Skrivanek.
Yeah.
I think we're like in the ballpark with these pronunciations.
Yeah, you'll definitely, if you read it, you'll know what you see the letters that it's that guy.
In my head, I was calling him Skrillex because I can't read.
Mr. Skrillex, just controlling people's BPMs on the dance floor.
I'm Skrillex. I serve the King of England.
I do think, though, that like while these people are all like hilarious, I get the sense that like Hrabal, and or maybe just through Didi is like he enshrines this ability as an art form, and I don't think totally derisively or dismissively. Like I think he genuinely believes there's some like, maybe that's the kernel of useful, kind of like the gem of to be extracted from the morass of just people like slopping down food and drinking and fucking, is like some weird sensitivity to who people are.
Right.
I guess it's still in relation to like what they want to fucking eat or buy, but like it's useful. And I don't know how much of a joke it is, because like it is funny that like I serve the King of England is a refrain, but like he's saying that shit right up until the end as well.
Right. And yeah, it does become this sort of like almost like mystical knowledge, and it sort of extends.
It's his mantra.
Yeah, it's his mantra. It's this sort of like yeah, like chant. It's like this Gregorian like repeated, thing, and it does, sort of extend in Didi's case out past the service industry. He's able to sort of like, he predicts all sorts of different, he predicts when the war is coming at one point. He predicts, because it has to do with sort of prediction and sort of like having a sense of people and like where the wind is blowing.
Right.
And he starts predicting all sorts of bizarre things. And people ask him, and in Didi's case, and we can talk about this scene because I thought it was so great. He never serves the King of England, but he does wind up serving Haile Selassie, who's obviously a real historical figure, who's the Emperor of Ethiopia at the time, and so that becomes his sort of version of where he sort of is entered into this mystical tradition of server knowledge.
Right. And that scene is so funny as well.
Oh my god, so funny.
Because the fucking meal they make is just like, it's so over the top and hilarious.
It's so extra.
It's very extra. It's very dark too. Like the slaughtering of the camel scene was pretty dark, where the I think it was a camel, where the camel just like knew it was gonna die. They slit his throat.
Exactly. Gross. But they make basically a turducken type of meal out of a camel.
Yeah.
And like, I kind of forget what else. Like they just keep stuffing different animals inside the camel. And it finally ends in boiled eggs, which I feel like, I don't know if I'm being too sweaty about this interpretation, but it did feel a bit like the sort of, evolutionary chain kind of Genesis thing, where at the core there are these eggs, and then there's these like higher order mammals, and then finally the humans feast upon it and like weep because it's so like delicious and like transcendently good.
So I actually found the passage where they bring that out, and I'm just going to read it because I think one thing we haven't really touched on yet is the actual style of this book, which I found really interesting as a sort of like hybrid of like relatively direct narrative with these other sections of like just totally stream of consciousness, like bouncing around from different topics to different topics. And it's sort of like, it's almost there are some paragraph breaks, but not many. And it's like pretty much just like a block of text thrown at you. And I think I didn't double check this, and I couldn't find any like sources on it, but I heard someone else discussing this book, and their claim was that the English translator actually inserted all the paragraph breaks, and they weren't in the original Czech. Don't quote me on that, but I had heard that, and I could totally see that being the case, just based on the writing style. So anyway, we all have the same copy, right?
Wait. Fuck. I can't do it because of my green screen, but yeah, we do. Yeah. We do.
Okay, so it's on 112 into 113. Okay, so starts on the bottom. The emperor, he's talking about Haile Selassie. The emperor stood up and pointed to the barbecued camel, and with the interpreter translating, said that it was an African and Arabian specialty, a modest gift from the emperor of Ethiopia. Two assistants brought two huge cutting boards into the middle of the dining room, fastened them together with clamps, set the camel down on this enormous table, and brought in the knives and sliced the camel in half with broad strokes, then cut each half in half again. A stupendous aroma spread through the room. In every slice, there was a piece of camel and antelope. And inside the antelope, a slice of turkey. And inside the turkey, some fish and stuffing and little circles of hard-boiled eggs. The waiters held out the plates, and then, starting with the emperor, we served the roast camel. I knelt down, the emperor gave me a sign with his eyes, and I served him his national dish. It must have been wonderful, because all the guests fell silent, and the only sound came from the clinking of all those golden knives and forks. Then something happened that neither I nor anyone else, perhaps not even Mr. Scrivanek, had ever seen before. First, a government counselor, a well-known epicure, was so enraptured with the barbecued camel that he stood up and yelled with an expression of bliss in his face. It goes on and on. Like, ultimately, this guy starts like pounding his chest, and he runs out into the street, and it's just like, like, so very extreme, like, but hilarious expression of like gluttony.
But also, there's that weird, slightly before the chunk you were reading, there's that just little acknowledgement that like the lower down in rank the different functionaries were, the more they ate. Yes. Until like you got to Selassie himself, who like I think just like has like a couple mouthfuls and just like closes his eyes and is just like, yes.
Yes.
I'm not sure what to take from that, but I thought that was interesting.
Well, I think this, the whole book, and there's a couple sections on this that I have highlighted. The whole book is very conscious of class and rank and
Right.
sort of, economic stature, economic and social stature in both with like, and that goes everywhere from within the restaurant industry to, in society in general. And there's obviously, we'll talk about later, Dee Dee's interaction with the Nazi party, which is a huge part of it as well. But, he's very conscious of that sort of thing. There's a line early on, let me see if I can find it, where he talks about that directly. Let's see if I can find it.
Well, there is even though I think you're obviously right, there's a lot of like, I think Dee Dee is very conscious and very like, he just wants to rise up. Like his goal is to basically just be a hotel owner someday. He wants to be a millionaire. He wants to wear like nice neckties. He looks at the people around him, and early on he meets a salesman, and there's a big section where he just talks about all the interesting characters that salesmen that come into the Hotel Paris. And this guy kind of puts the idea in his head that he has something special and he could like make it big someday. And that character is hilarious to me. He's like this huge fat guy that eats salami on his on his hotel floor. Like he goes into his hotel room and he's just laying on his back with like salami all over him.
The floor of his room with his money.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing I found interesting though, is that like even there's like a class system, and like, this person is not the lower class, whatever. The rich people that come into the hotel are mostly described as being like very indulgent, and they kind of have a rapport with a lot of the wait staff, and they tip really well, and they give them a lot of business. So I can't think of any instances where like the guests would come in and be like overtly horrible to the staff. Like there seemed to be more of a camaraderie sense than my memories of working in the service industry. It was
one of the things,
like a war.
One of the things that Dee Dee points out a little bit later in the book is that, there's this dichotomy between sort of being brought into this like Dionysian like suspended space in the restaurant where, it's custom for the customers to offer their waiter drinks whenever they're drinking, and like there's all this, the waiters are part of it, and there is that sort of camaraderie or that sense of being in a weird little community for that moment. But then he also says that like if you ever saw them out in the street, they would pretend they'd never seen you before, right? And they would
yeah.
So there's also that aspect to it.
Yeah.
Right. There's the class manifests
right.
In just this hard line, between like you have you have your sort of small purview as a waiter, or even if you're like a decorated waiter, that you will never breach your bubble that you're meant to serve in. Also, I like Dee Dee never gets the opportunity, or he just lives in a world where like he's just there to take in the information of these other people within this very specific industry and like kind of emulate them and desire what he's able to see at any given moment, which is like very little outside of these like sort of consumption and spending habits. Because like, initially he's living with his grandma and they're like fishing underwear out of a fucking river and like washing it and reselling it to factory workers and stuff. And it kind of sucks.
Which I thought, yeah.
Oh, and then I was just gonna say he's literally like boarding in these other places. Like it's not like he goes and like lives with a family or anything. Like he just lives in the hotels and like is meant to come up through this world and learn specifically from the like elegant head waiters, like,
Yeah. I was just gonna say, there's when he's talking about living with his grandma early on, there is a little line where he says that looking back, this is like the happiest time of my life. And I think that calls to I don't want to jump ahead too far, but the very end, he kind of gets back into that mindset, like living simply and kind of forgetting his whole I serve the Emperor of Ethiopia mantra in a way. You know, like he kind of liked and found himself back at the simple life towards the end and enjoyed it.
Does anyone mind just, and I think this is, I think I would, there's an extended section that I'd like to read. It's like a page. Just, I think, to get a sense of a little bit more of the writing style, but also one of my favorite scenes in the book. It's early on, and it's the reason I want to read it is because it sort of precedes this claim that he makes about class later. So there's this general that comes in. This is on 61 to 62. So it's early on in the book. It's his second hotel job and second server job. And there's this general who comes in, and he's a German general, and he's ordering food, and this is basically the description of them serving him. And I just found it to be one of the funniest things that I've read in a really long time, but also sort of describing what we're talking about a little bit. So this is starting in the middle of 61. The general said, "You are my guests as well." Zdenek bowed and brought 2 more glasses and filled them, and the general stood up, clicked his heels, shouted "Prost," and drank. We emptied our glasses, but the general took only a sip from his and made a face, shuddered, and spat out, "The devil, I can't drink this stuff." He took an oyster from the plate, threw his head back, and eagerly swallowed the delicate, slimy, fresh flesh sprinkled with lemon juice, and again he seemed to eat with gusto. But no, he shuddered and snorted with disgust, his eyes watering. He downed his glass of champagne and shouted, "Ah, I can't drink this swill." He walked from room to room, and each time he came back, he would take a piece of crab meat or a leaf of lettuce or some salpicon from the plates, and each time he shocked me by shuddering in disgust and spitting out, "The devil, this is completely inedible." Then he would come back and hold out his glass for a refill and ask Zdenek a question, and Zdenek would bow and tell him about the Veuve Clicquot and all about champagne, though he considered what he was offering, Heinkel Trachen, to be the very best. And the general, his interest aroused, would drink again, sputter in disgust, but then he'd drain the glass and walk over to look out into the courtyard where everything was dark except the floodlit porter and his work and the floodlit walls stacked with pine firewood. Meanwhile, the boss wheeled about silently. He'd glide up, bow, and then glide away again, and the general's mood improved, as if his disgust with the food and drink had somehow whetted his appetite. He switched to brandy and drank a whole bottle of Armagnac, and every time he took a drink, he would make a face and swear and sputter in Czech and then in German. I'm not going to read the German. I can't go there. It was the same with the French specialties. After every mouthful, the general seemed on the point of vomiting, and he swore he'd never take another bite or drink another drop. And he would roar at the head waiter and at me, "What is this you're giving me? Are you trying to poison me? Do you want me to die, you swine?" But then he would drink another bottle of Armagnac, and Zdenek would lecture him on why the best brandy is called Armagnac and not cognac, because cognac comes only from the region called Cognac, and even though the best cognac comes from 2 kilometers outside the border of Cognac, it still has to be called brandy, not cognac. By 3 a.m, this is like my favorite part. By 3 a.m, when the general predicted that he wouldn't last because at 2 o'clock we had killed him by offering him an apple, he had eaten and drunk enough for 5 men, but still he complained that it wasn't filling him up, that he probably had cancer without knowing it, or stomach ulcers at least, that his liver was shot and he was sure to have kidney stones. And then he goes on to like start shooting glasses and stuff in the hotel.
Yeah.
I just thought that whole scene, and the scene is much longer than even I read, but I thought it was really descriptive of that sort of feeling that you were trying to get at, Paul.
Well, and
what feeling?
Well, just the feeling of sort of like being a part of this weird camaraderie where he's insulting you, but he's also curious about what you have to say, and he wants more of the champagne you have, and even though he says he hates it, and it's just
yeah,
sort of, and that comes
well,
back
I mean,
to this sort of sense of like a friendly insult. That's another thing that comes back over and over again in the
yeah. I think you can probably speak about this more than me, Gabe, but when I did work in the service industry for a short time, it seemed like everyone was just a fucking character. Like if you were to be in that world, you had to almost become one, or you were one no matter what to other people that you worked for. People that came in that were regulars became like characters, and there's always something just weird and unique about a lot of these people that is just like the strange behavior. I mean, a lot of the head waiters are just like, they're very much themselves, and they have just strange ways of doing things. And I thought that was just really fucking descriptive and great and really funny, and he just hit the nail on the head. He must have known this world in some way, the author. I don't know if he ever worked in the service industry, but I was like, damn.
Probably. He was probably getting shut down from ever publishing anything and needing to like survive. I bet.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because like, you know, everyone there's so much, it's such an information dense book as well. There's so much that I know, like I feel like the vast majority of it just sort of like blew by me. Like I all these things feel highly coded in like 8 layers of meaning, each like little event and you know, character that walks in and each scene, which is something I really also think is true in general, like maybe about these kind of Eastern European, former Russian satellite places. Having to speak, this is kind of tying into the point I'm trying to make, like awareness of being observed, being reflected in the writing as like, you know, and in the same way that Didi is constantly observed, and like you were saying, Paul, it turns you kind of are molded by the awareness of it, which is like almost a cliched kind of like, what, I don't know, that's like Foucault or something. Like
yeah, the panopticon.
Yeah, but you know.
Yeah, I know that.
I mean, I do think, but he does have that sort
Nice,
of
dude.
awareness of, and this is the sort of follow-up passage that's a lot shorter that I wanted to read after that one describing the general, because this is where he sort of, for the first time, articulates directly this sort of class consciousness that he gets from his work in the hotels. This is on 68, just at the top of 69. So this is after the description of the general. He says, here in the Hotel Tuchata, I also learned that the ones who invented the notion that work is ennobling were the same ones who drank all night long with beautiful women on their knees, the rich ones who could be as happy as little children. I always used to think that the rich were damned, that country cottages and cozy little parlors and sour soup and potatoes were what gave people a feeling of happiness and well-being, and that wealth was evil. Now, it seemed that all that stuff about happiness in poor country cottages was invented by these guests of ours, who didn't care how much they spent in a night, who threw money to the four winds and felt good doing it.
and one of the funnier moments too, which I feel like comes after that bit of revelation there, is when Didi starts just chucking fucking coins everywhere for the pleasure of watching people scramble for them, and by pretending that they were looking for something else.
Yes.
They're like, no, I dropped my watch, and they're secretly like getting the coins that he dropped and stuff. And just kind of like, in a very like comically overt way, just sort of watching the power of cash, cold hard cash.
Yes.
One other person, the porter, there was one thing about the porter, the big monstrous dude who chops wood
for show.
Yeah. Another great, I don't know.
Great character.
But it turns out that his wife cheated on him at one point with like a gendarme of some kind, and he killed that guy and beat his wife almost to death. And then he had a cat that he really liked, and then the cat mated with a tomcat, and he got pissed again and killed both the cats.
Well, no, he what does he do? He takes the tomcat and like severs its spine and leaves it to die for 2 days, and then he just shuts out his cat and is like, no, you can't come back.
Yes, slut. Yeah.
And his cat just kind of like doesn't come back after a couple of days.
But it was so gross that like he severs the male cat's spine by pushing a brick into its stomach or something against a wall until he's paralyzed, and then he throws it on a gutter grate and just leaves it there. Like,
very, very cruel.
But all of that for this one moment where he says, Didi, I think, is describing the porter. He's like, he was a gentle and sensitive soul, and therefore had a short temper, which is why he went straight after everything with an axe, both his wife and the cat, because he was horribly jealous of the gendarme and the tomcat. And I remember hearing just something, again, I think this is, I forget where I heard about this. Maybe it was Nabokov said something about this, but the difference between sensitivity versus sentimentality, where like, It's just like there's just a distinction where like one of them is able to still be like horribly violent and do like unspeakable horrors to people while still being like, you know, very like emotionally affected by a piece of music, or like, you know, a kitten in you know, a gutter or something, while at the same time just being able to fucking like murder whoever. And
Yeah, I read that as like kind of a poke at people that are, you know, humble and quiet and sensitive, and you get the sense that they're just like a nice person, but people like that can be basically holding something back about their personality like their entire lives, and then it bubbles up. I thought it was funny. It was a funny little jest at those
right.
types of people. uh,
This book is about going mask off. This book is about
yeah, I mean, speaking of masks, I didn't underline it, and I maybe one of you guys can find it, but the scene where he goes to like the second or third hotel, and he's under a head waiter, and the head waiter like is known for being able to hold like what, like 12 plates on one tray.
yeah.
And he also like every time he goes out into the floor, he'll like dip down and like take a few like fingers of the soups and shit. But and then there's one scene where he walks out and immediately gets like sneezed on or something, or like a guy like bumps into him and he drops 2 plates. And apparently there's a rule that if you drop 2 plates, you might as well just drop the whole thing. So he like fucking flings it. And then he goes crazy for like 4 pages. And like it just doesn't end. Like he just goes mad, and he went into the kitchen and like ripped the stove off. So like it was flooded with freaking like gas or like smoke and shit. And then you think it's over, and then the cops come, but then he like goes to the bathroom or something and rips the water pipes out. So he just goes insane. It was so funny. I was cracking up.
The subtitle of the book is actually Sicko Mode.
Yeah.
It's actually Molly Percocet. Yeah, and it's all in the name of like honor and this hilarious rule, unwritten. And even that German, I also liked, we were talking about that German glutton guy who's just going ham and like eating and gagging and more, and then like just charging his weapon at like crystal and like cups and stuff. But like I think the key is like in the end, it's all approved of, it's all like contained in this world and then put on his bill.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
feel like that's super significant. And then these people come all like, you know, they've drained their fucking boil for a minute, and it's like they're relieved of its pain for a second, and then they're all like grateful, and then they leave until they're full of fucking noxious pus again. They need it to be drained at these establishments, which are there to like kind of like they feel like a lot of the time like relief valves for like the worst aspects of humanity.
Yep. Yeah, and there,
Yeah.
I mean, later on in the book, there's so many. I mean, there's so many examples of that. But like, there's the hotel that has like the specifically designated rooms for the doctors. The Department of Internal Medicine is what the name of the room is, and it's basically where like these doctors will come and get drunk, and they have a prostitute come, and they like don't have sex with her, but just like medically examine her. Like, and it's just so dark and bizarre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're still swirling around basically the first, I don't know, third of the book.
So yeah, maybe we should move on to so that's sort of his experience in the hotel and service industry. And there's so many other weird stories. There's a story about like a bunch of Bolivians who come to get a golden statue of Christ blessed by a priest, and it becomes this whole like caper almost briefly, where like there's a second copy that's fake that they have to hide,
but they keep getting it confused with the real one.
Yeah.
And like at one point one of the guys who's meant to get it from even just takes a doll that he thinks is just cooler looking at one point. And they're like, no, we need the Bambino de Praga.
So there's so many weird little stories like that throughout also.
Yeah.
So ultimately, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was saying that I mean, I think that's pretty obviously maybe a dig at just like the church or religiosity, like religious people just not knowing real from fake, and sometimes even straight up just being distracted by something cooler looking.
Well, and of course the whole thing, right, is that like they have to bribe like every church official they interact with, and the main guy that they wanted to bless the statue will only do it if he's on TV and broadcast while he's doing it.
Man, fuck, that's a good, yeah.
So he's moving through the service restaurant industry, and then World War II slowly sort of starts seeping into the story. In this case, in the form of a girl that he falls in love with, who comes into his hotel one day, whose name is escaping me right now. Do you guys remember? Lisa.
Elizabeth, but Lisa.
Yeah. And she's a Nazi gym teacher, basically.
Perfect. So perfect.
And they fall in love. He gets fired from his hotel job because there was he's awarded a medal by Haile Selassie, and his boss resents him. And there was a mix-up where they thought he had stolen a golden spoon, but he actually didn't. And so he winds up being fired after he starts hanging out with this Nazi woman for being a Nazi sympathizer, basically.
And I think it's also significant that the last other two jobs as well, he's fired.
Yes.
For like being, and he's almost blamed for the Bambino de Praga mix up too, all by like petty kind of vindictive waiters who feel like he stepped out of turn.
Yep.
I feel like that also informs kind of his vibe later on as well.
Yeah, and I think we're gonna get into some dangerous territory here, but I felt like this section where he sort of is drawn into Nazism and sort of Nazi sympathy is so effective at like humanizing that entire process.
Yeah.
And like it's so gentle in a lot of ways in terms of describing how this kind of like short, like you said, Matt, like a little manlet outcast guy who just happens to have blonde hair and blue eyes is like feels like he finds a home when he had been denied one for so long by sort of, and he's like valorized by the Nazis. Like you're awesome, you rule because of these incidental facts about you.
But he does a great job of starting you out gently on that path.
Yes.
And then, but also like no punches pulled is like very, very quickly. Didi's like, yet I'm just in the same situation I was previously. This is so contingent on things that aren't even in my control.
Yes.
And like none of these people actually give a fuck about me. There is just this kind of decorum around everything.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the meeting between him and Lise was so like genuine and like it was just a good little love story. Like he defends her basically on the street and in the hotel, and like there's a scene where a bunch of Czech dudes see her like her German like socks, and they like rip them off and run away, and he's like, he gets beat up in the process because he's trying to defend her. And then in the hotel, he gets fired because one of the waiters like spits in her food. She comes into the hotel and one of the waiters spits in her food. And basically gets fired and gets spit in. He gets like every waiter just like spits in his face.
Yeah.
But their relationship starts out so genuine. I didn't know at first that she was a Nazi. And then so it's all very like soft, and you understand why he would want to be in love with this girl. And they also have like a really hilarious sex scene before they get he has this thing where he like lays flowers on people's rumps, or what does he call them?
Their laps.
He puts it right on there, like, oh, yeah. It's a sort of fetish he develops early on. He starts going to prostitutes in his first job, where he likes to lay various types of vegetation on women's, like just crotchal areas.
Yeah, I mean the relationship is kind of like Indiana Jones in the third movie
Hmm.
with I think her name is actually Liza in that movie too, isn't it?
I'm forgetting, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, never mind. Pop culture reference that
You don't
is
want to pursue it?
beneath me.
It's fine.
Beneath me. It's beneath me. We're on a book. I can't talk about Indiana Jones.
I mean, you said Eliza, and I was like, Eliza, and I almost thought of wild thornberries.
I think it's I think it's more like James Bond's relationship with Xenia Onatopp. Personally,
Right. No more foreplay.
right.
And he's all, yeah, goddamn.
But anyway, I mean, I think.
Can I just say how much I wanted to beat off to that scene the first time I saw it?
Yeah.
When I wanted her to pop my head like a watermelon.
Yeah, that is definitely a good
The first
childhood.
kind of like Dom thing as like a child. I was like, damn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually think you're probably right. For a lot of people our age and our generation, that was kind of like the first like, what's happening here?
Yeah. Do I want to
Yeah.
be hurt?
Yeah, we were all playing GoldenEye on N64, and then that scene, you see
Just
that
rumble
scene,
packs in our laps.
what's happening? What's happening here, Mom?
Shit,
She's a playable character in GoldenEye multiplayer.
yeah.
But I will say, I mean, I thought that, like, sort of, Matt, going back to your point, that the sort of the ease with which he sort of sets this up and like the genuineness of their emotional connection. And I mean, I won't read it, but that sex scene with them that is like beautiful when when they first sort of have sex, it's like, it's super like, I'm like, damn, that sounds bomb. Like,
Yeah,
really,
right.
like, well, just perfect. And then it sort of, it transitions sort of, really smoothly into this very like dark place where, I think the moment that he kind of realizes like where he's at is, when he's forced to be inspected by the Nazi doctors to see if his semen is of quality enough to breed with an Aryan woman.
Yeah,
So-
just a German doctor lifting his penis up and calling him an animal. Yeah. Oh,
So I do want to read this part. So this is the German doctor trying to get him to go jerk off so they can test his semen. And he patted me on the shoulder, handed me some photographs, and turned on the light. I found myself looking at pornographic snapshots of naked people, and whenever I'd had this kind of picture in my hands before, I'd always turned stiff right away. But now the more I looked at them and the more I saw those headlines and the stories in the papers announcing that so-and-so and 4 others had been sentenced to death and shot, and there were more of them every day, new ones, innocent ones. And here I was standing with my penis in my hand and pornographic snapshots in the other. So I put them down on the table because I still couldn't manage to do what I was asked.
Wait,
Yeah.
I want to keep reading because I think I underlined this last section here. So right after that, it says, finally, a young nurse had to come in after a few deft strokes of her hand, during which I didn't have to think about anything anymore. She carried off 2 beads of my sperm on a piece of paper, and a half an hour later, they were pronounced first class and worthy of inseminating an Aryan vagina with dignity. So funny, horrible.
right. And then, then he's suddenly in this nightmare of a breeding program,
Yes.
essentially, where he's having sex with Lise on appointment, and it's just completely loveless. And he's also working in this like, I don't know, spa for other Aryan women who've been impregnated by
Basically a farm.
Yeah, exactly. By like guys who then go and get their fucking legs blown off. And like, once again, he finds himself the servant to these women who are just like naked around him and stuff. And they just do not see him as a person, a real entity. It's just like this thing that comes and like brings them big glasses of milk that they drink.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just like, it quickly becomes very shitty and bleak, and he desperately wants to get out of the situation.
Yeah. So I mean, I found like this to me was one of the like saddest sections in the book is describing him sort of working at this like Nazi breeding farm, and he's talking about the sort of couples that he sees there. and it's we're reading a lot on this episode, but I think it's warranted. So this is him describing his experience at of the people at this breeding farm. This is on 150 to 151. I could also tell the difference between a soldier from the coast and one from inland, and whether he had been a worker or a farmer. And that was my only entertainment as I waited on tables with no break or free time from morning till evening and into the night. I waited not just on men, but also on women who were here on a secret mission. But that mission was sadness and a kind of ceremonial anxiety. I never again, as long as I lived, saw married couples and lovers who were so gentle, kind, and considerate to each other, or who had so much wistfulness in their eyes and tenderness, like the girls back home who used to sing Dark Eyes or The Mountains Resounded. In the countryside around Kochasek, no matter what the weather, there would always be couples out for walks, always a young officer in uniform and a young woman, quiet and absorbed in each other. I, who had served the emperor of Ethiopia, had never experienced this and couldn't put myself in their place. Only now have I got to the core of it, that what made these people beautiful was knowing that they might never see each other again. The new man was not the victor, loud-mouthed and vain, but the man who was humble and solemn with the beautiful eyes of a terrified animal. I was just like,
yeah,
that to me, it's just like ugh.
Ugh. Yeah.
And the beautiful eyes of terrified animals is something that happens also at the very end.
Yep, that's a recurring theme at least a couple times.
Yeah, just like him describing the fact. I'm not gonna read the full chunk, but just like Lee's talking, like putting on Wagner, and and so that there was a sense of harmony in her Teutonic womb, so that it would be graced by the new man of the new order of the new blood of the new thinking and the new honor. And he's just like, and I felt everything that makes a man drain out of me. Like I used to be a mongrel dog, and whereas now I had a job to do, like a purebred sire with a purebred bitch. Brutal.
Yeah, and
So
I just
funny.
think it's so the contrast between just like all of this the Nazi discourse about all that stuff that you were just saying about the new honor and new man and all that, and it's just
Right.
the sad people who are just going to die. And there's another description later when he works at another sort of spa for people coming back from the war, of them all just like swimming around like tadpoles and mermaids, like having their legs blown off in this water and trying to recover. And the juxtaposition between the discourse and the reality is just so sad.
That was great. That description of like, yeah, the young men back from the front, like swimming, and they seem all like strength and vitality, and then they slowly drag themselves back onto the like beach, and they just don't have legs. It's like very eerie.
Yeah. So another sort of point of irony about this whole Nazi discourse is that after this process of breeding and sort of farming and testing and all that, and his perfect sperm and this perfect Nazi woman that he's married, they wind up they do have a child, and the child turns out to be a complete like mentally handicapped and like not capable of taking care of himself, and it's just like this horrible cruelty.
Right, just this cretin.
Yeah, he calls them a cretin.
My favorite word.
Well, and once again, I think that his son like that creeps into Dee Dee's like nature of not feeling worthy or something, like, oh, even after all this, my sperm isn't worthy. And even before that too, like when he's getting married at the marriage ceremony, Liza, what was her name?
Lise, I don't know. Yeah.
She's like a well-known girl, like she's the daughter of a hotel owner, and that's one thing that attracted him to her in the first place. And at the marriage ceremony, like all of these Nazi generals and comrades are like, they love her and they're like shaking her hand, and she's like the center of attention. But Dee Dee is having like that same feeling he had when he was working in the hotels. He kind of thought that marrying Lee's, like, I'm retarded.
Don't worry about it.
He thought that this marriage would kind of boost him up socially. But in this moment where he's getting married to her, he's like going to shake these Nazis' hands, and they like won't shake his hand. They still think of him as being like a lesser being because he just works as a waiter or whatever. he's Czech, he's not really one of them. And they kind of had this bitterness towards him because they're like, how did you get this beautiful young girl when I have all these freaking Nazi medals on my chest right now? And she picked you.
Yes.
So he never really gets into that world the way he wanted to. And I think that was a big parallel to how he felt when he was waiting tables all those times. Like he never really felt like he could make it past a certain level because there was always some sort of disrespect, or like there had to be something greater for him to jump to the next level, and he's constantly searching for it, but it's not working out for him. And even this marriage to this beautiful woman and moving away and leaving his past behind, it still didn't work out.
Well, I think you're onto something a little bit, Paul, with like it, you know, because that marriage starts off like you said, there's this like sex scene, you're like, damn, all right, and then like you know, it starts off as something genuinely beautiful and naturally occurring, and this kind of thing, and of course what that happens is he ends up achieving something that is considered by all these people who put the fucking time in and follow the rules, because he's just flitting from one like regimented situation to an hierarchical situation to another, and like the big sin there every time, no matter where he goes, is like skipping a step or like seeming to step out of turn with his appointed rank.
Yep.
And he gets fucked over every time that happens, because like, you know, they eventually they find a reason to what, like arrest him and beat the shit out of him, even though he is still Lisa's husband, and you know, like, yeah.
Well, yeah, he goes back to Prague, I think, and then he gets mistaken for an informer and he gets
Right.
beat up, and
He
he's in
gets
jail for like,
he gets mistaken for Zdenek, who is working for the opposition, and you know he sees Zdenek on like a train station, at a train station, and they grab him because he sort of looks like Zdenek and was making the sort of motion that they thought was the you know, whatever the sign that the person was gonna make, and so they grab him instead of Zdenek, and yeah.
but he ends up actually loving it. He's like laughing the whole time, like blood's coming out of his nose, and he's like loving it because he actually has kind of denounced the choice he made, and actually wants to be back in Prague someday and have the respect of these hotel owners. And he's like, that I fuck myself because I'm married to a German and now my country is under occupation. So he loves the entire stint of his jail time. He thinks of it as like some sort of saving grace, that if he ever comes back, he'll be able to, because of like, oh, you were in prison, so you're not a Nazi sympathizer or whatever. But that doesn't work out either.
I mean, he loves being purified by punishment.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Which
ultimately,
is very German, very Nazi of him.
Well, they're basically like the way they render the kind of death cult that is, you know, the blood and soil nationalism that they're sort of, you know what I mean, like is so well represented by all those couples. Like again, this would be more in the sentimental rather than sensitive realm of like the special, like they would meet and like gaze into each other's eyes at the hotel before the men would leave for the front, and like all part of the like scintillating pleasure of that interaction is doomed romanticism, which is just sort of like all the shit. And the same thing happens with Lise. Like she goes to one of the fronts and she needs to literally see like young men, because she's a nurse on the front, and she needs to see recharge emotionally in her sentimental nihilism by like seeing young men get killed and have their fucking limbs blown off, and suddenly she's back to like being horny for Didi in the like regular way. You know,
Yeah.
it's like just the most fucked dynamic.
Yeah.
So the war starts to turn, and ultimately, you know, Lise and Didi are separated, and Lise, I believe, goes back to her hometown, to where her father owns
Cheb.
Cheb. Yep. And Didi
Cheb.
goes to try to find her there, and she has her son with her, and the city gets bombed, and she dies in the bombing, and the son is, you know, to be given up to a some sort of organization that watches, invalid kids.
We
And
say that the son's favorite thing is to drive a nail into the ground with a single stroke.
yeah, so this comes back later, is that the kid, one of his like, I don't know what the proper term is, but one of his obsessions is that he loves hammering nails. And so he just is constantly hammering nails over and over and over again. Yeah. And so,
can I just I just love that they, after all of this selective breeding, the product notably is a strong cretin.
yes.
They did their job, didn't they?
Yeah.
But that scene where he comes and finds Lise and she's dead, that scene was fucking terrible. It was the first time in the book where it took a huge dark turn for me.
Her head fell off.
Yeah,
So
he buried her. He couldn't find the head. She's found gripping the suitcase, which is, we haven't talked about the suitcase yet, but the suitcase holds these like stamps that were Jewish stamps from before the war, and she was like, these are worth a lot of money once the war is over.
Basically Nazi plunder that's happens to be worth a lot of money.
Yep.
So I mean, he finds Lisa's body, he buries her, he never finds the head, and he basically just walks away with the suitcase and leaves his son there. He like gives him a bag of nails, and he just walks away from the situation, which was brutal as shit. But I don't know.
Cue black metal.
That was yeah. That was a big shift for me in his character, but he instantly starts feeling like horrible guilt, and he starts like basically hearing and feeling nails being driven into his scalp at all times.
It's like I just wrote the telltale heart next to that scene. I was just like,
yeah,
just a little doff of the cap there.
So the last section of the book, after his wife dies and his son is left behind, is titled "How I Became a Millionaire," which I think is just hilarious. It's like you just read this horribly poignant scene of him finding his decapitated wife's head, and like his son just like pounding nails into the rubble of their bombed building, and like the next chapter is just how I became a millionaire.
Just Scott Adams.
And essentially this section is, he sells the stamps and the plunder that he was recovered from his wife, and is able to buy his own hotel, which is in this old quarry. And he sort of builds it up to be this fantastic. He buys a couple hotels, but he has to sell them because of this telltale heart nail pounding thing that he keeps hearing in his head. And he ultimately builds his own in this quarry, and it turns into this great hotel, and people come from around the world, and including some of his old bosses. But ultimately the coup takes place in 1948 in February, and all of the sort of the property is reappropriated to be used for the people, right? And it's communist revolution. And all the millionaires are rounded up, and he is so happy to hear this because he's a millionaire and he gets to be rounded up with all the millionaires and gets to say, I'm a millionaire. He never gets the notification, and it gets to the point where he goes to the police office and is like, why didn't you come get me? I'm a millionaire. And they're like,
he's like, look at my bank statement.
You're not on our list. And I think there's some implication that Zdenek is like pulling the strings behind the scenes to keep him out of prison. But he's like, no, look, he shows them his bank statements. He's like, I'm a millionaire. Put me in the camp with all the other millionaires.
I love Zdenek too in this moment because, like, yeah, he's not there overtly, but I love the double-edged nature of his help. Because he's like, I get to pay back, the karma of like you taking my punishment while also still hurting you. It's like he wins so hard for that one.
Yes.
And I just love that quality of his, kind act, quote unquote.
Yes. And so they do sort of, I guess, take pity on him in a weird way and throw him in with the other millionaires in it's like a converted church or a converted rectory or something like that.
Yeah, seminary.
And, seminary, yeah. And the next sequence is basically over time showing how the millionaires just sort of start living their normal lives again in their supposed prison. So it starts out like, the guards are like, hey, we want some better food. And so the millionaire's like, if I go get some money from my house, we can bring my chef and we can have great food. Yeah. And then they start to like let their wives come and visit there's special cells that are just for the wives when they're there on the weekends. And ultimately, like in the final sort of turn of absurdity, the millionaires put their guards in the cells and pretend that the guards are millionaires, and then the millionaires are the guards, as this absurd joke.
It's
Gabe,
so funny.
This is just the progressive Swedish prison model.
Yeah,
right. It worked. I just love how they're just like basically they like start a kind of semi hotel.
Yeah.
As well, like the prison is kind of also a hotel.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, it turns into just like dudes rock. Like we want to hang out. It's like summer camp. Like, I mean, one thing I wanted to say about the prison too, I'm pretty sure it has no fence, so like anyone can just leave whenever. Is that true? Or it's like a tiny fence. And also the guards are walking around, they're like constantly like dropping their guns. And I think there's one scene where the guard says he doesn't even like his gun, he doesn't want it. It's just like a total weird, it's just a weird scene that I was like,
yeah,
it became absurd.
Like how money, like if you have enough money, things just always tend toward the mean, which is just you're fine and nothing matters.
Right, and everything's kind of porous and for show.
Yes.
Like and yeah, because I loved all that stuff where they kept locking the gate. It's just a gate standing with no wall around. It's just a gate. And then they'd be like, oh fuck, I forgot my key, and they'll walk around the gate to the back and get the key and then unlock it and relock it. It's just like, I mean, stuff like that is
And so
I mean, sorry, well, I think one thing we should talk about, I think we're going a little bit long, but honestly, this book was so jam-packed, it's more like a 320-page book, so I don't care if we go that long.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, though? It's like, well, it's just like, there's no breaks. I mean, a normal book of this length would just be less material. But anyway,
it is just like block text mostly.
We didn't actually talk about how he became a millionaire, though. Like, he ends up selling the stamps and building this like very cool, hip, artistic hotel in Prague. I think in Prague, right? It's definitely in
about that, didn't I?
We mentioned this.
Oh, we did?
Yeah, dude.
The Quarry Hotel? I don't remember hearing the word quarry.
Are you kidding me?
Was I just zoning out? For like,
damn, dude.
We literally talked about that.
Are you checked out? Get it?
I am checked out. I am checked too. I think it's this coffee. There's something in it.
We're doing Spinecrackers Morning Edition so that we could be zippier and on our fucking game.
I am zippy. I think I zipped along too fast though, and I skipped time. I traveled through time.
You know what you zipped like? That guy in the hotel who does the zip line diving into the quarry lake. Pro here.
Well, that's funny. I literally do not remember talking about the hotel at all. But,
also, what is the significance? I was so curious why Steinbeck was included as another name drop.
So it does have a similar sort of thing to the kind of like the book we read last week, Nazi Literature in the Americas, which is that the character does interact, and also Forrest Gump, where
exactly
the main character does sort of in his own sort of stumbling way interact with important real historical figures, whether it's Haile Selassie or Steinbeck coming to his hotel. There's real historical figures that he interacts with here. So yeah, that was a little puzzling to me too, Matt. It was like a big deal for him that Steinbeck comes to the hotel, and Steinbeck tries to buy the hotel actually.
Yeah.
I didn't really know what to make of that story.
Me neither. And he's like, maybe I would have done this, but I wish I had a higher profile author like Hemingway. And I was like, I don't know what this is, but seems like some tomfoolery is afoot here about these guys.
I think what I made of that scene was that Didi was constantly trying to grasp on to being in the upper echelon, and this hotel was his thing. And I think the Steinbeck trying to buy it possibly would have even gave him some social dignification that he was after, but he denied it because he thought this was the be all end all thing. Like this hotel was his. I almost wish he did take the money because he kind of found this realm of like artistic creativity in the hotel that was like beyond his other hotel owners.
Mhm.
And I was like, maybe this is his thing. But he's so like enamored, enamored,
Enamored.
Again, enamored with the thought of owning this hotel that he just can't let it go.
And ultimately, you
Um,
know, ironically, I think, or not ironically, but just perversely, like I think he gets more sense of recognition and an affirming up of his kind of identity as he wishes it to be from being jailed than
Yeah.
actually having like an artist buy anything off of him.
And I think because
Yeah.
sort of like you said earlier, Matt, he's always kind of like coming to where he's at in the wrong way or at the wrong time. And, even when he's finally, admitted to the millionaire's prison, the other millionaires don't respect him because, he's a war profiteer. He got his money the wrong way at the wrong time. And
yeah,
so,
it's not just new money, it's new Nazi money.
right, exactly.
Yeah, he's nouveau riche in the worst kind of way. It's like teeth in a drawer with gold fillings. It's like not cool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna piss.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right. So finally, the very last section of the book is him sort of moving. He embraces his sort of working. He's like a working class person now in the communist government, and he's forced to do manual labor. He goes out and works in a forest, cutting down some trees with a French professor for a little while, and a young girl. And ultimately, he winds up as this sort of hermit living alone in a cabin in the woods, maintaining these very obscure like logging routes in the middle of nowhere with a dog and a horse and a donkey and a cat as his only companions.
A goat. It's a goat, actually.
Yeah, sorry.
Jesus Christ.
Whatever.
Jesus Christ.
He goes into town on the weekends and the villagers love him and he tells them these crazy stories about his life, and he does his sort of like, I know things that you don't know because I served the emperor of Ethiopia. And it's just sort of a moment of him kind of like reflecting on his life and going back and thinking through things and kind of deriving lessons from his various experiences. And ultimately it's sort of like kind of wraps up as him sort of writing this book as he's going.
He's doing a little self-crit, as we say.
Doing some self-crit for sure.
Yeah.
And that's basically it.
This part to me was, this is relative to the rest of the, the whole preceding book, which was like fantastic. But relatively, this was the weakest portion for me, I thought. Just because I didn't expect Hrabal to like lay it as plainly maybe as he did in this portion.
I agree. I thought it was well written, and there were some really like poignant moments like with the animals and the little villagers and stuff that he interacts with. It sounds like he's fucking talking about Animal Crossing, the little villagers and animals.
That's right.
Really good. But so I thought there were some really good moments and lines. Like I thought the stuff about him telling the villagers that if they ever find him dead, to bury him like halfway on the hill, so when his body decomposes, half of it'll flow into this river and half of it'll flow into the other.
Yeah,
I really like that sort of stuff. But yeah, I didn't really think it was necessary. The whole sort of like, like it's just like you can picture it in a movie where he's like sitting back in at a desk. He's like, and now I'm telling you this story. And it's just
right.
And
he's like the actor with old man makeup on and a fake beard, just like
it really felt like the sort of the final scene of Titanic. And I was like, don't need it.
Well, he's tending this road, and it's straight up just like the road is like just basically a metaphor, I suppose, for like his life. And it was just like, life is a highway. It's just like, okay, well.
So again, yeah, but anyway, so that's it. That's pretty much the story.
Yeah, it was kind of like the end of Forrest Gump.
Yeah, Jenny dies and his kid goes off to school.
And he was relating the story to some other listener.
Person on a bench. Yep.
So any final takeaways, any sort of thing you want to hit on before we do what we have to do?
What we got to do? No,
Not
I mean,
really.
Overall, I would just say I did really love this book. I liked reading and switching it up to something that was like written to be funny, which was, I don't think I've ever read a book like that before. So it was good.
Well,
Good
Eastern Europeans of this time period, my man.
Yeah, I really enjoyed. I thought it was funny. It was really sad. It was political. It was like just, yeah, I loved it.
Probably 100 million times better than Hume's Will.
Come on, man.
All right, so let's transition to the fan favorite segment. We literally just read another book.
Yes.
Where we indulge our basest lizard brain instincts and put the main characters of the book we just read into Harry Potter houses.
Which is Dee. I feel like Dee. It's only through the end that Dee might be Gryffindor for me.
Spicy.
Because he was fucking
only towards the end. I thought he was Gryffindor throughout.
I feel like he was because he's not particularly loyal, that's for sure. And he's acquisitive and opportunistic in a lot of ways. And he just kind of copies people a lot of the time.
Well, loyal is an attribute of Hufflepuff.
Hufflepuff. So. Oh, well, that's why I'm saying he's not.
Not a Hufflepuff.
Yeah. No, he's not a Hufflepuff.
I was gonna go with Slytherin until the end.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm gonna go just sort of like a Gryffindor who left the path of Griffins or whatever, I don't know, whatever the fuck. He's fucking Slytherin until the end, then he's Gryffindor.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Like he turned into a Gryffindor at the very end. That was like his prize as like an older man who was able to like successfully incorporate his prior experiences.
I mean, he's Slyvindor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, are we gonna do like Inside Out where it's like mixtures of emotions now? Like we're gonna have like
No, we can't do that.
Slither puffs and fucking Huffledores. Okay.
No way. I'm gonna just say Slytherin. I'm not getting into this mixed house thing.
Fine. You know what? I'm gonna go Slytherin 2 then. Because otherwise I have to do the mixed thing.
Slytherins can be honorable.
True.
Yeah.
Just like, what do we say?
Hufflepuffs can rape. All right, and let's keep that focus. Gabe's wife walked in and heard us say that alone. Probably the only thing of this podcast she heard.
No, the other thing she heard was how awesome the sex scene was.
Oh, great.
Listen, dudes rock, dudes read, all right?
So yeah, yes, I think Slytherin. Okay, what about Zdenek? Hufflepuff? Okay, we should note that at the very end, there's this poignant scene where Zdenek comes and just like visits him in the forest and they don't really say anything and and he just kind of turns and walks away. They kind of just walk away from each other after just kind of like mutually.
It's like the end of
for presumably the last time.
It's like the end of that Batman movie where Alfred, if I say you out.
Oh yeah.
Just unacknowledging each other, but a little twinkle in each other's eyes. That's kind of what it was like.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go Hufflepuff as well for sure.
Yeah, I think Zdenek's a Hufflepuff.
I'm gonna say Hufflepuff. Yeah, he's Hufflepuff. Strong Hufflepuff though.
Is there anyone else who really deserves a rating? Lisa?
What about Lisa? I would say Slytherin.
I would say bad Gryffindor.
I think bad Gryffindor for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe.
Because I mean that whole scene, she's very like, the whole scene where she pours the soup all over herself in the hotel. It's hilarious.
Yeah, she's pretty like in your face, Chad.
She's bad Gryffindor.
So like a Gryffindor that maybe became a Death Eater for a short period.
Yes.
No, we're not. We're not slipping in and out.
Bad.
That wasn't.
Death Eaters aren't a house.
That's true. You're right. You're right. Never mind, Paul. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Come on. Have you read Harry Potter?
Yes. How dare you? The fuck would you say that to my face?
I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm sorry. I crossed the line.
If this was a different time period, that would be duel worthy.
So yeah, I don't know. Those are the main ones that I thought of that needed ratings.
Yeah.
There's a lot of characters I would like to dive in deep to it, but we don't really have to.
Yeah.
No, there's a lot of characters in the book.
Characters in this book that we could go on and on about, but I think those are the big kind of three.
Yeah.
So what'd you guys think? What'd you guys think in terms of how much you liked this book in a reductive number rating that tells you nothing about it?
I was gonna go with a 4.1.
Nice.
I'm gonna write these down.
I got it.
Okay.
Come
I would say 4.25.
I love that. For me, it's like a 4.68. I really loved it.
Nice.
You know what?
Overall, positive as shit. This is a good ass
You know what?
book.
Good book.
Mine was gonna be a 4.5-ish or so, and I might I do think the last section it dropped some points for me, but I did enjoy it so much. I'm gonna boost it up to 4.44.
Okay. Love it.
Right on.
Yeah.
Well,
that's I Served the King of England by Bohumil Hrabal.
Folks, that's our 3 cents on it. Or 6 cents.
Your spines have just been cracked.
Oh, okay.
Correct.
We're just gonna try. Let's just throw some ideas at the wall here. Chiropractic.
Since I finished this book, the next thing to do is drill a hole in it so it fits on my dumbbell and I can lift it.
Right.
Yeah.
This is part of Paul's new mind body routine.
Yeah, it's a mind muscle connection. So finish a book, drill a hole in it so it adds to the weight of your dumbbell or bench press, and then you can
deadlift it.
You can you can curl it, you can do whatever.
And it'll get, it'll be progressive. Each book we read, you add them to either side. Slowly you're lifting more weight, you're getting beefier, you're getting in brain and bicep.
Totally.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.